So we start with the book of Acts once again. 2 weeks ago, we learned about the start of the early church and how so many people came to know the message of Jesus. Eventually, there were so many people that came to learn the message of Jesus that they needed more leaders to take care of the people joining the church. You see, these 7 leaders were chosen to take care of the needs of the people that were joining the church. And one of those 7 leaders was a man named Stephen. And Stephen was described like this. Stephen, who stood out among the believers for the way God's grace was at work in his life and for his exceptional endowment with divine power, was doing great wonders and signs among the people. See, by choosing someone like Stephen, and we can only imagine the other 6 were just as good and full of God's power as Stephen was, the church was off to a pretty great start, weren't they?
Unstoppable!
Yeah, I would say they're unstoppable. That is, until a group of Jewish people came in and started causing some unnecessary trouble. We keep going, and it says, however, they couldn't resist the wisdom the Spirit gave him as he spoke. Then they secretly enticed some people to claim, we heard him insult Moses and God. Which wasn't true, right?
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
Right. They were lying. The Jewish people were lying in order to get Stephen to stop spreading the message of Jesus. They secretly enticed some people to claim, we heard him insult Moses and God.
He did what?
Did you catch that? See, they're making up lies about Stephen in order to get him in trouble about spreading the message of Jesus. They stirred up the people and the elders and the legal experts. They caught Stephen, dragged him away, and brought him before the Jerusalem council. Now, the Jerusalem council, those were really important people that anytime somebody insulted the religious law or Moses or God, right, they were brought before the Jewish council. And so this is becoming a really, really big deal. Everyone seated in the council stared at Stephen, and they saw that his face was radiant, just like an angel's. The high priest who was presiding over the Jerusalem council asked Stephen if what he had said was true. And Stephen came back with the longest speech in the book of Acts. So what we're going to do is, with the rest of the jars that I have here, we are going to summarize it. He started by talking about Abraham and the tribes of Israel.
Leave your country, your people, go to the land I will show you.
After he talks about Abraham leaving, he then goes into Abraham's descendants. So Abraham, who had Isaac, who had Joseph, who had 12 sons. You remember Joseph's 12 sons, right? And the coat, I think that's the ones over here.
Look at that silly colored coat. Get him!
Yeah, and then his son was sold into slavery to Egypt, and everything kind of went south from there, right? And then we go into Moses, which also is Egypt, and that was when we heard the sound,
let my people go.
Yeah, let my people go, right? All throughout Israel's history, they had great moments of when they were faithful to God. This is why he pointed out Abraham and the rest, because there were some incredible Israelites that were obedient to God. But then, just like all humans, there were moments of doubt, and there were moments where they were falling away from God. And then he tells the people this: you stubborn people, in your thoughts and hearing, you are like those who have had no part in God's covenant. You continuously set yourself against the Holy Spirit, just like your ancestors did. Was there a single prophet your ancestors didn't harass? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one, and you've betrayed and murdered him.
Mic drop.
Now that's pretty crazy. If you were sitting on trial like Stephen, would you tell the people of Israel that they were wrong? And would you tell them that they betrayed the righteous one? The place just goes absolutely nuts. Let's see what happens. At this they shrieked and covered their ears. Together they charged at him. Threw him out of the city and began to stone him. But then Stephen says something that you might be familiar with. It's something that Jesus said before the same people killed him. And that's this. Falling to his knees, he shouted, "Lord, don't hold this sin against them." And then he died. The beautiful thing is that after Stephen's death, the church didn't just stop. It didn't just come to a halt. In fact, in the next verse, it tells us this. At that time, the church in Jerusalem began to be subjected to vicious harassment. Everyone except the apostles was scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria. Now you may look at this and go, wait, but they scattered. They went everywhere. They're no longer just in one place altogether. But do you remember what Jesus said before he ascended into heaven? Do you remember Matthew 28 that we've talked about before, to make disciples of all nations? And now the people of God have been given the opportunity to make disciples of all nations because they're literally spread to all nations to avoid this persecution. And that's the beautiful thing, is that Stephen's story was not the end. In fact, Stephen's story was the beginning of the rest of the New Testament. We'll go on to hear about incredible people like Paul and Timothy and everyone who helped make the message of Jesus spread to the ends of the earth. And so with that, I want you to think about our key question for the week. When has there been a time that you've been scared but kept going? Because I know the people of God here were probably terrified, but they kept going. And they didn't let this persecution stop them from spreading the message of Jesus. In fact, this persecution allowed them to spread it even further. So when were you scared but kept going?